On today's Locked On Jayhawks deep dive into one of the top players still available in the transfer portal, JT Toppin.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, and you can find our show here with Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Please give us a 5-star review, like, and subscribe on the YouTube side. If you could, helps us out on our end of things. And thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're deep diving into another possible transfer portal target, one of the top players still available in the portal, who is JT Toppin, a transfer from New Mexico who is also testing the NBA draft water. So we'll get into his scouting report, possible fit with Kansas, where things are at there, if there is any contact, whatever. And then the latest offseason and a little update on what's going on with the KU baseball team on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right, we're going to start with some info on JT Toppin, scouting report, everything that's going on right now. So who is JT Toppin? He is a forward from New Mexico who is both in the portal for the transfer portal and undergoing the NBA draft process. And sounds like he actually did pretty well at the combine a week ago. So who knows? He could end up staying in the NBA draft. He could end up coming back to college. I don't know. This is another player that, similar to, we had some conversations about like Cam Christie, who there hasn't been any public contact or any linking of this player's heard from Kansas, or there's been a visit scheduled, or this or that. To this point, there hasn't been any of that so far. I did see a recent article talking about like Texas being in hard on them so far. Again, he might just stay in the NBA and Kansas might just not be interested because of the position he plays and what they already have on the roster. But I do think this is an interesting exercise to go in because I don't know. I think he arguably might be the best player available in the transfer portal at this point in time. Anyway, he is listed at 6'9", 210 pounds. But at the combine, he measured at 6'7" without shoes. So probably more like 6'8" with shoes. Up to 221 pounds, though. He had a 7.5-inch wingspan, though. So really, really long arms. And then an 8'10" standing reach, which Johnny Furphy out of comparison was like 8'8.5". So standing reach, not that much taller than Furphy, but both kind of playing the four in a different way. He came into New Mexico last year with the Lobos as a 4-star recruit. He was top 130 in the country on 24/7 Sports, but certainly wasn't, top 50 recruit or anything like that. And he killed it as a true freshman. He went for 12.4 points per game, 9.1 rebounds per game, 0.6 assists, and then really good defensive numbers, 1.9 blocks and 1.1 steals per game. That was in 26.6 minutes per game for a team that won the Mountain West Conference tournament, got an 11 seed in the NCAA tournament, or actually favored over Clemson in the first round of the NCAA tournament, ended up losing that game. Clemson goes on to the Elite Eight. His shooting numbers, too, really good, 62% from the field with a 65% mark on 2-point shots, and he was 11 of 32 or 34% on 3-point shots. The free throw is not so good, though, 56.5% at the foul line, while playing some 4 and a little bit of 5 for the Lobos last season. Now, he wound up leading all freshmen in double-doubles and field goal percentage last season across the country. He was second team All-Mountain West, and he was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. He didn't have the best game in that NCAA tournament game against Clemson. He went just 2 of 7 with 6 points. Did find a way to still add value, though. 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal. And obviously nothing was really working for New Mexico in that NCAA tournament game. And he had, plenty of opportunities against other good opponents too, though, where it wasn't just, hey, this is the one good opponent you played against. Let's see what you did. Mountain West was really good this year. And I know the Mountain West has had their struggles in the NCAA tournament, which, continue to a certain degree this year. And San Diego State made it to the Sweet 16, like Utah State won a game and some other things happened. But like San Diego State, who, did make a national title game a year ago, made the Sweet 16 this year. They played them in the Mountain West Championship game. He had 13 points and 11 rebounds in that game. And overall, he still shot 63% on 2-point shots in the 11 games that he played against KenPom top 50 opponents. So yes, he was actually still really good against those better teams. And he also wound up in the top 20 among 85 qualified players in the Mountain West who logged 500 plus possessions for offensive BPR on Evan Miyakawa's website, evanmiya.com. So by that metric, was top 20 overall in offense. He was also top 5 on defense. Good for overall a top 10 score in the league. So by one metric, he was a top 10 player in the league, which makes sense. He was second team all Mountain West. That would put you in the top 10, but was top 5 defender and a top 20 offensive player. Some of the synergy numbers of note. These are fun to dig into here for JT Toppin, who, by the way, you might be wondering at this point in time, is JT Toppin related to Obi Toppin? Because Obi Toppin did have his younger brother, Jacob Toppin, who was at Kentucky. Now I don't know where he's at this point in time. But no, JT Toppin is not related to Obi Toppin, at least from my quick understanding of it. But still, you could use the same phrase that people were saying with Obi Toppin, which is, I don't know, it's just a fun, silly little thing to say. Ain't no stopping JT Toppin, right? It's always fun to say. Anyway, synergy numbers of note on JT Toppin. He was in the 70th percentile defensively last season. So, that's a number where as a freshman, especially being 70th percentile, that's good. And you're really only going to get better as you grow, as your body gets more muscular, as you get more awareness of everything going on in the college game. Good stuff there. 97th percentile overall offensively. Just a very efficient offensive player. Didn't put up, 16, 17, 18 points per game. Wasn't super high volume, but still, 12 and a half points per game as a freshman and doing it on that level of efficiency. 97th percentile in the country. Again, very impressive. 69th percentile on offensive rebounds and the putbacks there. So he was obviously somebody who was able to finish on those offensive putbacks, but it's something that he did a lot too. He had the top offensive rebound rate in Mountain West only games, and he was top 5 in defensive rebound rate. So this is a kid who is an elite rebounder. Again, the best offensive rebounder in the Mountain West, top 5 defensive rebounder in the Mountain West, and he gets stickbacks there, ranking in the 69th percentile there. He was in the 65th percentile on post-ups, so at least he was proficient at it. He was, above average to solid at it. But if you're specifically, the one thing he did really well in post-ups was hook shots. He was in the 88th percentile in hook shots. So maybe not a full complete post game yet, but the hook shot certainly was a go-to for him that he hit at a very high efficiency. 70th percentile is a pick and roll man. So again, you're just chalking up all these things that he is at least above average to good at. And that was just a young freshman where you expect growth from year to year. He was good in pick and roll. 79th percentile as a cutter. And here's a fun one, 98th percentile in transition. So he is a big man who runs the floor really, really well. Now, he only ranked in the 46th percentile in spot-up shooting. He was 8 of 24 on spot-up threes. Very limited volume there. But honestly, I don't know. If you're talking about what's the fit for Kansas, you're playing him in a front court next to Hunter Dickinson or next to KJ Adams. If you throw a front court out there with Toppin and Dickinson, even though Toppin's not shooting the high volume of threes, that's 2 big men who can shoot threes if you leave them wide open here, right? He was in the 63rd percentile in catch and shoot. He went 11 of 31, 35.5% from 3 on catch and shoot threes. So if you leave him open, he will make them, even if it's not at a very high rate of how often they're coming. Overall, he was 78th percentile with his jumper. So that tells you that if he wasn't shooting a ton of twos, that he probably shot really well from kind of the mid-range area. He also shot well on runners. He shot 50% on low volume on runners, which is a good number to have there. And he was in the 87th percentile at the rim, where he shot 68% at the rim, 67% on layups, and he had 33 dunks, which we talked about. If you're an everydayer, you saw this with our episode with Nick Schwartz. 33 dunks would have ranked second on Kansas by almost double the amount of what second place, Hunter Dickinson at 17, would have had last season. So somebody who is a good athlete, runs the floor well, can dunk the basketball, has shown a little bit of ability to space the floor as a kind of spot-up big man when you need him to, is an elite rebounder, and is a good defender. I think there are some real arguments to be had that he is the best remaining player in the transfer portal. And I don't say that lightly, because I think there's still a lot of really good players out there like Jackson Robinson and Wooka Poplar and Chaz Lanier and maybe some other guys we'll have a chance to get to deep dives to. But the question is, how well does he fit KU's roster because being a 4-5 man, that might make it a little tougher. So let's discuss that fit, how they would make it work on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom. With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help you reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors. And it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is yahoofinance.com. Continuing on with this episode of the show with more on JT Toppin, possible fit with KU, a little update on the offseason portal and KU baseball. And then tomorrow we're going to have a Football Friday episode of the show. So that'll be fun as we continue to move under the 100 days to go. We had the 100 days out countdown show a couple days ago here. So thank you to everydayers tuning in to those. Okay, so the big question here with JT Toppin is, unlike these other players that are guards, that are wings, where you can bring them in and conceivably they could play the 1 or the 2 or the 3, or if they're a wing, they could play the 2 or the 3 or the 4. There are a lot of different positions they can go into that they can find minutes at to try to make it work. It becomes a little bit more difficult with the 4 and 5 man, which is funny because when you actually look at the positions that KU has, like, if you're talking who are the wings on the roster, well, you have Rylan Griffin and you have Rakeese Passmore and you have AJ Storr, and KJ, by nature of playing some 4 minutes, the 4 is kind of a wing position, even though he's not truly a wing, but you know what I mean, that he's kind of dipping his toe into that water a little bit. You have a lot of guys that can play those minutes, and even in the sense of if you're going to play a 3-guard lineup for any minutes at a time with Dawano, Marco, and Zeke Mayo, then basically one of them becomes wing-like in that sense. So you have a lot of guys who can play the wing position. You have a lot of guys who can play the guard position, right? DeJuan Harris, Marco Jackson, Zeke Mayo, Rylan Griffin, a lot of guys who can play it. When you're talking about like actual true number 4s, I mean, in theory, it's like, okay, KJ Adams is a 4. Who else are 4? It's like, well, Rylan Griffin can play the 4 in a pinch. It's like AJ Storr, maybe in today's day and age, is more of a 4. That's okay, but he's not a great rebounder, so he's maybe more of a 3. You have like less guys who play that position. Like Zach Clemens playing there would be out of position a little bit, in my opinion, and what that would do, like ball screen wise, defensively and everything. But I just think it's weird because there's less players at that position, yet I feel like it would be more of an issue to bring on a player like that. And the reason why is because there's going to be, if you're bringing on a 4-5, there's going to be at least 28 minutes a game, probably. I don't know, maybe if you want to go lower, 26 minutes per game, but realistically, probably closer to 30 minutes per game for Hunter Dickinson at the 5, right? So a majority of the minutes are being eaten up there. Whatever you think is going to happen with KJ Adams, whether he's coming off the bench or he's starting, he's playing a big role on the team. He's playing 20-plus minutes per game, right? 22, 25-plus minutes per game. And it could be 28, it could be 30, it could be 32. I don't know. But those minutes are probably coming at the 4. Maybe he gets a few as a backup 5, but yeah, those minutes are coming at the 4. And so you run out of minutes that you would have there for JT Toppin, right? And that kind of becomes the issue because you're not going to play a lineup where KJ is next to JT Toppin and next to Hunter Dickinson. Now, could you make this work in a way that you could make the minutes work, where you basically just said, we're going to have a basically 3 big man rotation for the 4 and 5 spots between KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, and JT Toppin. Toppin's going to play the 4 and the 5. Dickinson's going to play the 5. KJ's going to play the 4. And we'll still have a little bit of minutes available to play AJ Storr there, but for the most part, we'll play those 2 guys. And then we'll have, spot minutes or foul trouble or throw a guy out for a handful of minutes here or for, one lineup stretch with Zach Clemens or Flory Badunga or something like that. Maybe that's entirely possible for KU. And maybe you can make that work even. Maybe you could even convince KJ to come off the bench. And I don't know, but there's something to the idea of a lineup with JT Toppin next to Hunter Dickinson that would really excite me. Even if it's JT Toppin playing 20 minutes a game and KJ playing 20 minutes a game and Hunter playing, 28 minutes a game to keep everybody happy, but to give everybody minutes. I mean, competition ain't a bad thing. And the idea of what I talked about earlier, where you could have two big men in Toppin and Dickinson who can both stretch out and shoot threes, at least a little bit, to keep defenses honest. That Dickinson was like the best defensive rebounder in the conference, and you would be adding another really good defensive rebounder in Toppin, who's also an elite offensive rebounder that you should dominate on the glass, that you would have a guy in Toppin who's more of your mobile big man who gets blocked shots and a bunch of dunks that could be basically Hunter's not really your big man that's going to come over and help defense and block a shot away. A guard gets blown by the other guard, and your center, your Jeff Withey, is going to come by and erase it and block the shot. That's not really Hunter's game. He'll get the occasional block here or there, more of a positional one-on-one post-up defender. With Toppin, he's more of that, he can come over weak side and get that big shot block. And I think that would be an elite big man pairing. Now, what is the likelihood of this? I don't think it's very likely, and there's a reason why KU has not had that contact with. And, it's easier for me to sit here today and say this fascinates me and would excite me if that were the case, and I think he's the best player left in the portal. And so to that point, you just try to make it work. But it's another thing if you're Bill Self. It's another thing if you're these people in the staff, because you do have to worry about the locker room. You do have to worry about, who we keeping happy a little bit. And there is a fine line there. Like, you can't just completely give in to that. You do have to add competition, and you can't just, lay down for somebody to kind of take command, for one player to take command or a handful of players to take command. But there still is a line. I don't know where it is about, we are trying to add competition. We are trying to, you have to earn your minutes and all that sort of thing. But also, we don't want to screw you over, and make you lose a ton of minutes going into one of your final seasons. So, you can understand, and there's a little bit of a political game there, both in terms of the current team and also in terms of future recruiting, that you don't want it used against you negatively, that you have some other coach being like, hey, you don't want to go there. They're just going to over-recruit you. They're going to tell you you're going to get this big role, and then a week later, they're going to bring on another player out of the transfer portal, So, like, there is the kind of political game here that I get, but I don't know, man. I just think Toppin is such a good player. And that lineup of even being able to say, hey, we're going to play a lineup where when Dickinson goes on the bench, you use Toppin at the 5 and KJ at the 4, and that's a super athletic front court, and that's fun for minutes. Or the lineup with Toppin next to Dickinson, like, that's fun for minutes. And I don't know who comes off the bench. I don't know who plays more. I don't know if somebody plays 28 minutes per game, somebody plays 20, whatever it is. I just think if you're trying to collect the best level of players, if you're trying to add that, I think this is the best one available there. And somebody, if he does end up coming back to college, could stay in the NBA draft, is going to get an absolute steal late in the portal in JT Toppin. All right, let's continue on the latest in the transfer portal and a little update on KU baseball on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can get in on the Royals right now. I mean, they're absolutely on fire. They're hot, right? So whether it's a future to win the division, to win the American League, or just to win that day, cover the spread, Cole Reagan's over strikeouts, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. And again, if you would have got alt line yesterday, it was going off at 6.5 for Cole Reagan's. If you could have found a way to alt line it over 11.5, I would have loved to seen those odds, and that would have been great. And you would have been a big winner yesterday. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, finishing up here with the latest in the offseason for KU basketball and a little KU baseball update on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So this is back-to-back times that we had an episode where we talked about Javon Small, and then he committed to West Virginia. The first we did a Javon Small deep dive several weeks ago, and then literally the day of that got released, hours after it got released, he committed to West Virginia. And then we had an episode earlier this week, and we brought up the Javon Small thing, it wasn't as much of a deep dive, but we did bring it up. And then he basically reaffirmed his commitment and signed his letter of intent with West Virginia. So that is officially off the radar for KU, and the number of possible targets starts to dwindle down a little bit more there, and maybe makes it more likely of what Kansas is going to have. Now, the ones you still kind of look at here is what's Johnny Furphy going to do? What's Jackson Robinson going to do with the NBA draft? I don't know. Do they, push harder for a guy like Wooga Poplar or Chaz Linear? Do they, come out of the blue for a guy like we've been talking today with JT Toppin, or maybe somebody that we'll try to have a deep dive on next week? I don't know. That kind of becomes the question here. And then KU baseball, meanwhile, they're playing today, depending when you're watching this or listening to this. They might have already played, but 12:30 on Thursday against Oklahoma, who's one of the best teams in the country. This is a great opportunity for Kansas. You wanted this to happen, not because it's going to be easy. Oklahoma's a really good team, and so this is going to be very difficult for Kansas. But they need to right now. They're in a position coming into this Big 12 tournament where they're on the outside looking in to the NCAA tournament. They've put up a great season, and it's been an unbelievable step in year 2 for Dan Fitzgerald. But to make that step, get to the NCAA tournament, they got to do some special stuff this week down in Arlington. And what better opportunity than to try to beat one of the top 10 teams in the country? And that's what they can do if they can beat Oklahoma. And so the RPI and the KPI, everybody knows what the RPI is. That's been around forever. The KPI is kind of a new metric or I don't know if it's new, but it's new that they're using it in the NCAA tournament committee this year. KU's a little bit higher on that. The K-State win certainly would help them in both those metrics. You win a game like this over Oklahoma, that could be the difference of you ending up on the right side of the bubble. Now, they probably, in my eyes, need to do even more than beating Oklahoma. The way I view it, maybe they have to go to the Big 12 championship game based on, where some of those metrics are. But because that is a new addition to the process of the tournament committee, we don't really totally know how it's going to affect the selection process for better or for worse. But I do think if you're Kansas, just win the whole thing, just take care of business yourself. But yeah, win this Oklahoma game at the very least, and then you start getting people talking about could you be on the right side of the bubble. But yeah, either way, it's been a great season for KU baseball. Let's see if they can finish strong this week in Arlington. That'll do it for this season, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Back tomorrow for a Football Friday episode of Locked On Jayhawks.